Hello and welcome to the Tech and Sports podcast. Tech and Sports is the show about how technology is revolutionizing all the major sports, as well as health and fitness. You can find it on your podcast service of choice. My name is Mandy Kovacs, and unfortunately, my co-host and friend Alex Radu has left the show, but I'm here with our new amazing co-host, Alex Coop.
Hey, that's me. Hello there.
We figured it was only right to replace another Alex with another Alex.
Yeah, very, very savvy. Good job, guys.
Oh, yeah. And so this week we discuss whether the NBA is the most tech-savvy sports league in North America, plus all the biggest news from the last week, new apps or wearables, and your weekly concussion update. But before we get to that, we'd really appreciate it if you'd review and rate the Tech and Sports podcast. We've been growing the show over the last few months, and we really appreciate all the support so far. So with that, sit back and relax because the Tech and Sports crew is entering the game. All right, first up is news from the NHL. The league started a new series this past week that features hockey superstar Wayne Gretzky having conversations with Hollywood stars and notable hockey fans. The first 3 episodes featured Jon Hamm from Mad Men, who's a huge St. Louis Blues fan apparently, Taylor Kitsch from Friday Night Lights, and David Boreanaz from the show Bones. The Great One asks them questions about how they got into hockey and they also get to ask him questions as well. These are only the first 3 that are out right now, but the league says that more will be released around the start of the season. You can watch them on NHL.com or the league's YouTube page or social media channels. I also want to mention that this is part of the NHL strategy to engage younger audiences and gain more fans in less traditional hockey markets. So, for example, you may have noticed the NHL series called Hockey 101 with Snoop Dogg on Facebook that features the rapper explaining the rules and traditions of hockey in his own unique way. And honestly, I've watched most of these. They're amazing. I love them. I think they're great for the league. And they've been streamed more than 50 million times on YouTube. So they're clearly doing pretty well. But more on that later, I guess.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if Wayne Gretzky, is he a host that could carry a show like this? Like, I think you would probably know best, but
yeah,
does his personality lend to that?
It's not bad. I watched the first episode with Jon Hamm. That's the only one I managed to find so far. And it's good. Like, they have a really good conversation. Even, like, things about how Jon Hamm wears the exact same outfit whenever he goes to see a game. And so Wayne Gretzky kind of called him out on it, and he just laughed. Oh. Yeah, it wasn't bad.
That sounds neat. That could be fun.
All right, next, Intel has done a lot to power the tech at the Olympic Games, and now it's launching the Intel AI Challenge for the Olympic Games as a call for ideas from the developer community on how artificial intelligence can help enhance the world's largest sporting event. The company is looking for professionals within the tech community to potentially create an AI experience that could be used for fans, athletes, and even business applications at the next Olympics in Tokyo in 2020. So if you have an idea that could speed up operations or logistics of behind-the-scene things, that would be perfect. Or an app that somehow improves competition. These will all be considered as long as they were built using Intel's AI frameworks or developer tools, which you can find online. So people have 3 weeks to submit their ideas at aichallenge.intel.com, and you could win one of 2 grand prizes of $3,000 in a Visa gift card, plus an opportunity for your idea to be used at the Olympic Games.
Yeah, Intel seems to be kind of all over the place.
They really do.
Yeah, they recently, they're teaming up with the NBA to push forward new ideas there. So that's pretty recent. But yeah, I'm curious what they'll come up with. 3 weeks, it was 3 weeks, correct? Yeah, it's not a lot of time.
No, which is like kind of surprising to me actually about this story. 3 weeks is not long at all.
Yeah, so I wonder if any ideas do come out of this, if they actually will come to fruition for these Olympics or how they'll be implemented, and whether or not those ideas will actually like impact the sports themselves or like the athletes that are on the playing field, or is this more of like a way to further engage the audience?
Yeah.
And maybe expand its reach. So like the criteria is kind of vague, but
it is. I kind of think they're looking for like an all of the above type of situation, which I mean, I guess they can pick and choose, right?
Yeah. Although the idea of like throwing it out to the community and asking them to engage directly is it's smart.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next, Fox Sports will be streaming live 4K video from the U.S. Open's 7th hole this year using 5G wireless technology. Thanks to the help from Fox Innovation Lab, Ericsson, Intel, and AT&T, fans at home will get ultra high-definition views of how players do on the difficult par 3 hole. So Fox cameras will transmit the 4K HDR video to a nearby production truck, and then using the 5G, which provides multiple gigabit speed with low latency, will be able to use the video and get that footage out to viewers. In the future, Fox could use this setup to stream live virtual reality from the US Open as well. So we'll definitely stay tuned for some of that news. And so my next story, this isn't exactly tech, but I'm really stretching the health and fitness part of our show because I think this is a super cool story. So Kansas City Chiefs lineman Laurent Duvernay-Tardif has become the first active NFL player to become a doctor. So he earned his medical degree at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, where he also played football, and according to a New York Times article, would often show up to practices still in his scrubs. So he was drafted in the 6th round in 2014 with a year left on his medical degree, and apparently was helping with an emergency C-section at a hospital in Montreal on the day of his draft. So being drafted put a pause on his degree for a bit, but he slowly took courses in the off-season and officially finished this spring. Chiefs coach Andy Reid was apparently fully on board for this and even has a personal connection to the story because his mother was one of the first to graduate from McGill's Faculty of Medicine. Now, even Duvernay-Tardif's teammates have been asking for medical advice in the locker room, even though he won't be a full doctor until he stops playing football. But, I mean, I love this story. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And to have a player from the league enter the medical field, or eventually enter the medical field, that, you know, I think that's important, especially when it comes to the conversation around concussions, which, you know, I would like to think that he'd be able to kind of further that conversation in an informative way and deviate away from what the NFL is doing when it comes to concussions, which is sort of brush it aside and, as we'll really talk about it a little shortly, you know, fight against the allegations against them. But yeah, I think this is great, and it's a first. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Exactly, and you came to a Canadian school. That's pretty impressive too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you gotta love those Canadian angles.
Oh yeah. Okay, now I wanted to talk about a huge story in basketball this week, and Coop, I think you'll help me out with this. The Ringer has finished a huge investigation that basically proves that Philadelphia 76ers general manager Bryan Colangelo created 5 fake Twitter accounts over the last 5 or 6 years and used them to tweet nasty things about his players, former players in the league, and even former work associates, and then also used it to defend himself against people that were critical of some of the moves that he made. So Colangelo is the former GM of the Raptors and tweeted things about how current GM Masai Ujiri is a fraud. And he's also tweeted about how former 76ers GM Hinkie shouldn't get all the credit for how fast the team rebuilt. So Colangelo allegedly used these Twitter accounts to tweet at journalists to ask players certain questions, like how Okafor failed a physical and it apparently ruined a trade deal last year that was in the works. Colangelo even allegedly gave away part of the team's draft strategy for last year's draft, where the team traded up for the number 1 overall pick for Markelle Fultz. It's just a crazy situation, and he's denied these burner accounts, all of them except for one. But there are so many coincidences, and all these accounts share like different followers and they share who they've followed. So I don't think these are really coincidences anymore, if you know what I mean. It's a really long piece, but I do highly suggest you go to theringer.com and read it because it's fascinating. And it's obviously an ongoing story, so we'll make sure to keep everyone updated. Maybe it'll even be our discussion next week. We don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. Colangelo never came across as someone who would be capable of something like this, but...
True.
But...
Isn't he kind of like a dinosaur, like a fossil, a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. But obviously, I mean, these are all still allegations, but like you said, the coincidences are piling up and... things are lining up in a way that doesn't look great for him.
No.
And yeah, just hiding behind, I mean, we criticize players when they do it. It's no different when a general manager does it. It likely looks even worse, especially when it comes to like front office activities that you normally wouldn't put out there in such a public fashion. yeah, we'll see what comes out of this ultimately, but it's not looking great for him. But I mean, it kind of looks great for the NBA, and this is something we'll mention a little bit down the road because it does involve. It does attach this story attaches itself to how the NBA is so social media savvy and how it's embraced social media. And so again, we're just seeing the word Twitter connected to the NBA in some way, shape, or form, which ultimately is probably good for the league, but very much not good for Bryan Colangelo. So
I do kind of think this maybe was like it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. Because I mean, I'm sure to some extent we've all thought about creating fake Twitter accounts just to tweet things about how much we hate our job, or like stupid things like that no one would ever trace back to us. But the fact that this is a GM of a team.
Yeah, I'd like to see a story one day come out that sort of delves into that aspect of what made him do it, if he actually did do this, and just the psychology behind like venting in a way that that is quote unquote safe until you get caught. But like, why do people do it? Why through a burner account, and just how often is that done in other, leagues? Is that a common trend or not?
Yeah, I would love to know if there are any NHL or NFL coaches doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, now we're going to move on to the World Cup because all the hype is starting to ramp up now that it's really only about a week and a half away. Last week, we talked about what Fox Sports will be doing for their broadcast, and now BBC has come out with their plans as well. So apparently the BBC will be broadcasting the entire tournament in 4K Ultra HD and also virtual reality, which will be available to watch through BBC Sports VR World Cup app using Gear VR, Oculus Go, and PlayStation VR headsets. But what's interesting about their 4K stream is that it can be watched on BBC's iPlayer home screen, but it'll only be available on a first-come, first-served basis. And access will be limited to tens of thousands of people because it's part of a trial run for the broadcaster. So tens of thousands of people doesn't seem like that many, but when you consider that soccer is the most popular sport in the world, millions and millions of people watch the World Cup every year, or I guess every 4 years, that's not a lot of people. It seems kind of weird also, but if it is successful, I'm sure the tech will be used in full at the next Olympics and World Cup tournament.
Yeah, it's not a lot of people, but at the same time, how many people you have to consider how many people are using the VR headsets, and that adoption hasn't picked up as quickly as people expected. So you really can't have a test run with, potentially tens of more thousands of people, because there probably won't even be enough people to jump on and give it a whirl. So this makes sense.
I guess you'd also need to have fast enough internet to handle this stuff too, right?
Yep.
And so not many people do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, and continuing with the World Cup for just one more second, the Australian national soccer team is using technology that's never been used before at an international level to prepare for the tournament. Australia's head of sports science, Dr. Craig Duncan, is trying to manage the fatigue of players and has been using technology that monitors their physiological status on a minute-by-minute basis. So we don't have too many more details other than that, but it likely involves some sort of wearable and software platform that can track and analyze all their data to make sure the athletes are in peak condition before the tournament starts and they're not too tired from all the different flights, from all the heavy training that they have to do before the game starts. And I also wanted to note that the Australian Institute of Sport developed a sports science model that was actually used by the Philadelphia 76ers over the last couple years. And we've seen how they've gone from bottom of the league to the second round of the playoffs this year. So it's clear that Australia is doing something right with all of this tech and all of these programs that they have set up for their sports teams.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think the NHL was looking to implement some kind of player tracking not too long ago. I forget exactly when, but they had expressed interest in similar tech that would track players.
Yeah, I think they used it at the World Cup in 2016.
Okay.
But they haven't used it since.
Yeah. And it's just my only concern, or maybe not my concern, but I think the player's concern might be is if teams and general managers use this tracking to evaluate players' performance and maybe have that factor into whether or not that player gets signed later on. So, if they can pinpoint down to the millisecond that, a player is becoming more fatigued or is like his performance is degrading by X amount of, whatever factor they're measuring, I think that's a conversation that is worth having, I think, when it comes to this type of technology and how it's used.
And all the data.
And all the data, of course, yeah. So how is that going to be used? Is that going to factor into contract decision-making, things like that? But in terms of just like the pure sort of tech standpoint, it makes sense to be tracking the player's physiological makeup during the game. So
agreed.
That's kind of neat. Well, be nice to see what results come out of that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay, and then our last story of the day, Rob Manfred, the commissioner of the MLB, sat down with Ken Rosenthal, a baseball journalist and insider with The Athletic, to talk about how the sport has changed over the last couple years. It was a really interesting discussion, and it's in the format of a Q&A. If any of you subscribe to The Athletic, I highly suggest you go read it. But I thought I would just bring up and kind of summarize some of the key points that relate specifically to technology, because Manfred was asked about the potential for having the strike zone called by technology instead of umpires, and he said, quote, "I think we are much closer than we were a year ago to having the technological capability to actually call the strike zone." So he says that the league has been working hard on the Pitch FX system that tracks pitches, and that its accuracy is actually way up compared to last year, which actually happened faster than he expected it to. And he says that while there still needs to be a discussion with the umpires on this, and what repercussions might surround this move, it could definitely happen, and he definitely did not rule out the potential of what I like to call robot umps. So I'm excited. I'm a big proponent of robot umps. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that now that we have a new Alex in town.
That's right. Yeah, I don't watch baseball a whole lot, but I do get frustrated pretty much every time at the umpire in some way, shape, or form, because they make boneheaded calls sometimes.
Almost all the time.
Almost all the time. Yeah, this is pretty cool. But hey, robot umpires isn't a bad idea.
No, exactly. Okay, well, that is it for our news section of the day. We are now going to move on to our new apps and wearables.
Yes, the NBA AR app got a significant facelift recently with its portal function. So I tried to test this out yesterday, but it crashed, so I kind of gave up. Oh. But it seems pretty cool, and if you can check out the videos online, but it's basically it's available on iOS. The app actually launched on the iOS last year, but it is available on all platforms. The latest update allows you to point your phone anywhere, and it scans the area, and then it literally opens up a doorway into the arena, sometimes into the practice facility. But in the example that's been circulated, it opens up a portal into the Oracle Arena's basketball court.
Cool.
During like the warm-ups or national anthem. I think in this case it was the warm-ups. And basically once the floor is scanned, the portal is open, you actually like walk through the portal into the arena. And
that's
actually
awesome.
If you like look around, then once you walk through the portal, the app enables like a 360 function, so you can actually look around and see stuff, and you actually see the portal behind you from where you came in.
Okay.
It's a pretty neat AR upgrade, and I think there's only room for improvement as time goes on, but it's another way for the NBA to attract people into their sport. And right now it is very much just applicable to these warm-ups and early stages of the game, but I'm sure over time they'll actually let you portal yourself into like actual highlight reels and like immerse yourself further into the game. So that'll be pretty interesting, but this is a pretty cool first step.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That sounds like a really good move. I'm excited to test it out.
Yeah, me too. Well, like I said, I tried to test it out yesterday, but it didn't work, but I'll try and test it out again. And then Capgemini recently announced a couple winners in their recent startup winners of the International Sport Tech Contest. And I hope I'm not butchering the name, but the performance category winner was Cadeau Sports, selected in the category focused on using new tools and processes to improve the performance of sports teams. And the experience category winner was Poppin Link, which focuses on enhancing sports audiences' experience at a venue and across broadcasting platforms. So congratulations to them. Both of those have been around for a while, but this is a pretty significant award, and they're actually used quite a lot of sports leagues already. So this is just kind of another bullet point in their resume. So yeah,
cool. Yeah, congratulations to them.
Yeah.
Okay, that was it for our new apps and wearables segment. Now we're going to move on to our concussion updates.
Yes, some news around the concussions and the ongoing discussions around concussions in the NFL. Very recently, lawyers for the NFL asked a federal judge on this past Wednesday to appoint a special investigator to look into what the league said is "quote unquote" extensive fraud in claims on the $1 billion concussion settlement. So the NFL claims that there are 444 claims that were flagged for denial based on evidence of fraud. And of course, fraudulent claims when it comes to concussions is bad, but I still think this is just like it's an ongoing, it's just like a knee-jerk reaction to try and sweep the concussion conversation under the rug. And when you look at all these statements, and I haven't read a story yet that cites the NFL saying, we know concussions are a problem, but these fraudulent claims, should be stopped. Like, they are very much just focusing on just trying to close the door on this conversation.
Which
again.
Is super annoying.
Yeah. So, again, not suggesting that fraudulent claims when it comes to concussions in the NFL doesn't exist, but to the messaging and the way that this has all been handled and delivered is a little icky. And, I just don't think the NFL is taking this topic seriously yet.
That's true.
and I think this is another example of that, especially considering the fact that, like I said, nowhere in this story, in these statements, does it ever mention the NFL acknowledging, the problem behind concussions and the fact that it is absolutely happening, but it's very much just focusing on the money.
Yeah, and they like to ignore the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one. And a brain bank in Boston is doing some interesting work. It's collected 560 brains of deceased athletes and military veterans, and a lot of them are from NFL players, former NFL players, of course. But more recently, it's actually getting brains from former NHL players. So, according to a story in Sports Illustrated, roughly one new submission every day and a half is now coming in from former NHL players. And according to the story, no such study regarding the impacts of the game of hockey on the brain have taken place yet when it comes to hockey players. Nothing very extensive compared to studies that have been done in the NFL. But that, according to the story, that's because the sample of available brains just isn't large enough yet. But again, this brain bank at Boston is trying to sort of spearhead that project and that research, and so that's pretty interesting. And they've hit some roadblocks here and there when it comes to the NHL trying to sort of muzzle some of the work that's being done here. But Dr. Anne McKee, she's from the research lab there, the brain bank. She's the one that's kind of doing a lot of this work. And if you read the story in depth, she talks a lot about the process behind it and what to exactly look out for when it comes to sort of the residue of concussions and like the impacts and the physical play in hockey and what that actually looks like in the brain. It's quite interesting. But to see this type of research now being aimed and focused on the NHL players, it's just kind of opening new doors in the conversation, which I think is important. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we talk about this all the time. Like, we criticize the NFL for not doing enough about concussions, but the NHL hasn't even acknowledged the link between concussions and CTE and head hits with hockey. And it's honestly really depressing and kind of pathetic and upsetting. I could keep going on with different synonyms, but I won't.
It is quite upsetting. And this, I think, as further research is done here at in Boston, and I'm sure this is going to trickle out elsewhere, it's gonna be impossible for the NHL to deny the correlation between the sport itself and the way it's played in some aspects, and the connection it has to CTE and concussions. But until then, this type of work is really important. But it's only a matter of time before they really have to say, you know what, this is a problem.
We'll have to pony up eventually.
Yeah. But like you said, yeah, the NHL is kind of behind when it comes to that discussion. And hopefully this changes things, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for our concussion update of the week. We're now going to move on to our discussion portion. So in our new apps and wearables segment earlier, we talked about how the NBA has introduced a new augmented reality portal. And it really got us thinking about whether the NBA is the most tech-savvy league out of the big four in North America. We've compared the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, and the NHL in the past, but it's been for things like how well they handle concussions and whatnot. We've never actually dissected which league has adopted the most technology. So that's exactly what we're going to do today for Coop's first tech and sports debate. So I don't exactly think it's a secret that the NBA might be the most entertaining league out of the big four, but are they actually the most tech-savvy league in North America? So Coop, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, my short answer would be yes. And the reason is if you look at the way the league has managed to globalize itself and attract so many new people across the world to the sport, I think it's undeniable that technology has a huge part in that, especially the way it uses social media, especially the way it's using augmented reality and implementing those functions in the apps and allowing people to pretty easily connect to the sport in very interesting ways that I don't think we see in other sports. And I think these AR functions are just the beginning of something much more interesting down the road. Perhaps later on, people will be able to log into these apps and actually like put themselves in the middle of the court while the game is going on. I think 5G will have to develop much more before that happens and enable that sort of real-time connectivity. And maybe the NBA wouldn't like that because then people would rather do that than actually buy tickets at the, in the stadium. So I don't know, but I think that type of interaction is going to be available down the road. But I think, yeah, my answer is still yes, because of the way technology, I think, has enabled people to tap into the sport and connect to the sport in ways that I don't think the other leagues have done. Now, when it comes to the actual technology that's on the basketball court and the technology that is enhancing the play itself, other sports could be ahead. There are more elements, I think, in other sports that sort of lend itself better to innovation, like in baseball, pitching, and like, attaching different types of tracking on equipment. Basketball, there's very few things you can do that with. But yeah, so you might be able to chime in on that a little bit more in terms of like what tech is actually being used on the playing field in other sports and how that compares to the NBA. But I think overall, in addition to the audience, the global audience that the NBA has garnered using tech, I think it's additional investments in startups and its partnership with Silicon Valley. I think that's huge. So I think that factors into it as well. But the other sports are pretty tech savvy as well, or the other leagues.
Yeah, to some extent. Like, I would still agree with you. Compared to some of the other sports, the NBA is definitely doing the best in things like obviously using social media, but a lot of the players are really tech savvy and they like to invest in tech startups. So I think that counts for something as well. The NBA is kind of the only league that's really been using these AR or VR apps like quite consistently. You don't really see that in any of the other ones. And so I did take a look at the other ones too. And so like the NFL, for example, has been doing some things, like they're in the process of revamping every team's website and app, which probably should have been done years ago, but hey, at least they're finally getting to it. They've adopted more mobile ticketing in most stadiums. They're starting to use more video replay and tracking technology, both in the footballs and on the players. But to me, it just seems kind of underwhelming and maybe even forced, because I mean, besides the tracking players initiative, much of the tech adoption is up to individual teams and it isn't league wide. Whereas I think the NBA has that sort of setup. Like when they adopt technology, usually all the teams get it instead of going individually. Like I'm sure some of them are a little bit more analytics focused than others, but for the most part, they all have that behind the scenes. And the NHL kind of has the same problem, because I know some teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning have started using messenger bots for fan engagement. But almost all the NBA teams in the league have something like that. Like I was reading an article where a guy was at the Golden State Warriors versus Cavs game, the first game of the series, and he actually got a message from the bot like right after Steph Curry scored, and it gave him like a gif of the moment, it gave him a video, and he was able to share that literally within like 10 seconds of this happening. And that doesn't happen in hockey. And I mean, some hockey teams are starting to employ more analytics, but there's also still a huge community of what I like to call old school hockey fans that don't really want to see any tech or analytics in hockey. And for the people that want to see the sport evolve, it can be quite frustrating to have that sort of backlash. Like it's happened with the Phoenix Coyotes. They have the youngest GM ever in the league, and he loves analytics. But the Coyotes are obviously not doing well right now, so a lot of people think that he's a failure, and it's because he relies too much on analytics. And I think the same kind of thing will be happening with the Toronto Maple Leafs as well, because Kyle Dubas is now, I think he's 35 or something in that range, one of the youngest GMs in the league. He loves analytics, and people will jump on any chance they get to criticize him for that. So to me, it just feels like the NBA, it's acceptable to want technology in the game. It's acceptable to adopt it faster. And the league itself is kind of doing these things of its own free will. You know, like they see technology and they're like, that's cool. That could help us. Whereas you get to the NFL or the NHL and it seems like they're only adopting tech just because the NBA is, or just to keep up, or just to keep pace, you know, not to lose fans. They want to gain more fans. And it's not that they like technology, but they know that that might help gain viewership. Yeah. That's my perspective on it.
It does kind of seem like they're playing catch up in many ways. But the NBA, I don't think is always as smooth in rolling out some of this tech. I think the example I'd point to where advancements in tech and like broadcasting capabilities and camera angles has really impeded the league and the flow of the game is when it comes to like the replay center.
Right.
So, you know, the NBA right now is criticized left and right frequently because of the way games are halted, especially near the end of the game, where referees stop, go to the replay center, and it's amazing how many different camera angles they have access to look at it play, but it's overdone and like it's really slowing the game down and grinding it to a halt. And there needs to be some fine tuning there when it comes to how they use replays and the technology they have in these new cameras that they have, which is fascinating, but I don't think they're using it too much or relying on it too much to make decisions. But no, overall, the NBA is very forward thinking in many ways, and technology is absolutely one of them. So, I guess we can maybe both agree on on the fact that yes, they are perhaps the most tech savvy among all the professional sports leagues. But
yeah, because the NHL definitely has that video review problem as well, and that's what's led a lot of the obvious critics to hate it even more because it has slowed down the game. But the only one I would say that would maybe challenge the NBA is the MLB, which I know like most people think like baseball is the most boring sport ever. I happen to love it. But, I mean, that's a pretty common consensus. The game is slow. Like, each game is at least 3 hours. But they've been doing a lot, like I mentioned earlier in our news segment, they've been doing a lot with the pitch tracking technology, and they're trying to improve that. I do think they will eventually move towards robot umps. I think that is inevitable at this point. There are so many complaints about how biased umpires are, just the fact that they miss calls almost all the time. I think that's coming, and they've been doing things like pace of play initiatives or trying to implement more tech. I mean, they've always used analytics. Baseball is the most analytics heavy sport maybe in the world. I don't know if that might be bold to say, but, you know, there's a stat for literally everything in baseball, and there always has been, and they keep adding new ones. So that would be my only maybe challenger to whether the NBA is the most tech savvy.
Oh, fair enough. NBA definitely rolls out new stat lines and different stats. Maybe not every year. It feels like almost every year. Like I hear stats for aspects of the game I never expected, but yeah, baseball definitely is very analytics heavy, which is very cool. And also I feel like the baseball does a good job of like sort of hiding the tech on the field. Like you don't even really notice
that's a good point.
any of like the advancements taking place. Maybe that's also because of how the stadiums are set up. But like in the NBA, you see all these like flashy digital billboards on court side or like floating around. People are on the phones. People on the bench have their tablets and things like that, out taking notes and tracking stats. And even the referees, the replay center and everything. So I don't know. I find whenever I watch baseball, it's like almost the same experience, whether it's on TV or live. But more specifically when it's live, it's like the same experience almost that it's been, many years ago, which is cool. Like you don't want to tarnish the sport or like infuse too much tech into it and have it change the way it looks or it's presented to the point where people are kind of turned off by it. So good on them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, well, that's it for today's episode. That was episode 46, which is honestly incredible. Didn't think we'd make it this far. But thank you all for listening. This is another reminder that we're also now in a daily format if you'd rather listen to us that way. You can follow us on Twitter at ITB Tech and Sports or on our personal accounts. I'm at Mandy V. Kovacs. And Coop, what's your Twitter handle?
It's just Alex Coop.
There you go. So you can now follow the amazing Alex Coop if you'd like.
That's right.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate the time.